Hi, and welcome back to the Delve podcast. I'm Allie.
And I am Adam.
Here at Delve Psychotherapy of Chicago, we offer individual, couples, group, and family therapy. We do have immediate options for extremely low-cost therapy. And remember to check out our website at delvepsych.com. It's DELVEPSYCH.com to reach out and book with us. Also check out our Substack, and that's spelled the same, delvepsych.substack.com.
Thank you so much for pitching us, Allie. And I wanted to pose a question to you today. So I put this in our show notes as a thing to talk about. I was just thinking about this idea this week. Do you feel like your mood on any given day affects the way that your sessions go?
Such a juicy question. I feel I really try to give each client my best, my most present, my most thoughtful, my most insightful self. But of course, there's days where you're just like, you have off days, and like some days I feel more on than others. But I was actually thinking about this question in terms of like the way I feel like I approach each therapy session in a way is kind of how I used to approach like auditions, in the sense of there was this saying like, leave everything outside of the audition room, like leave all your baggage at the door, so that when you go into the audition room, it's just fully, you are there in character no matter what has happened. You may have had the most terrible, crazy morning of your life. You may have just got in a car accident on your way to the audition. Like, everything could be crumbling, but once you go into that audition room, you leave everything outside that door and you try to be as on your game as possible. So I feel like that's how I try to approach each session. Sometimes I'm more successful at it than others. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting parallel. And I suppose I see, in terms of mentality, it's like put your game face on as best you can. Mm-hmm. But as you say, I think there's that element of how successful are we at doing so?
Yeah.
It also stands out to me that with acting, it's so interesting. Yes, you need to go in as an actor, but the art of acting is becoming a different person or becoming a different version of yourself.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
I mean, there's definitely different approaches to acting. Like there's the sort of outside in approach, where it's like you're putting on a character, and then there's like the inside out approach where it's you, like you're bringing everything in your own lived experience, your own memories into the character. So yeah, sometimes that can be difficult if you're trying to be your most authentic present self, and your most authentic present self is like going through it right now.
Right.
So.
And we're playing a happy-go-lucky character that day or something.
Exactly. It can be challenging. What about you? What do you feel like? How does your mood affect sessions, do you think?
Yeah, this came to mind. I think I had a day recently in which I don't remember what direction my mood had gone, but it was in stark contrast to what the client brought me, which makes me think about what you were just sharing, that idea of, let's say you're having a terrible day and the client comes in with you'll never believe what happened. Today, everything just fell my way. And you're like, I'm still salty about stubbing my toe,
right?
But sure, let's join you in your thing. And I think it's a centrally challenging thing that we end up having to do in this job, is really either join or very intentionally contrast with the client's energies and emotionality.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say that is always a product of my agency, so to speak. As in like that I'm choosing to do one thing or the other. I do think that we fall on intuition. I think I fall back on the sort of general vibes of the relationship with the client, especially if I've worked with them for a long time. But I think about this sort of biases that we may be introducing to a therapeutic session in having this impact of our mood in any given moment. Does it affect what choices I make? Does it drive the conversation in a particular direction? I sort of feel like it must, but I also don't know if that's bad.
Explain that piece. I don't know if it's bad.
Well, if I've worked with a client for a long time, then I'm likely to have interacted with them in a variety of mood states, and they're likely to have interacted with me in a variety of mood states.
Mm-hmm.
There are probably a variety of experiences in which I've been successful at tabling my mood and being very thoughtful and intentional about how I meet them in the present moment. And there's probably also a sample set of moments in which I've not done that as successfully.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I mean, we have a variety of different experiences together, which is a relationship. And those are valuable regardless. It's valuable to encounter me in a more somber place. It's valuable to encounter me in a more thoughtful place. It's valuable to encounter me in a more antagonistic place. Each of these are just ways of interacting with somebody who's trying to act as sometimes a role model, sometimes a guide, sometimes just a sounding board, sometimes just a guy who's just there. I don't know. What do you think? Is this making sense?
Yes, a couple of thoughts come to mind. I do think that there's value in like the authenticity of that relationship and the client being able to like see you as human. I do think there's a line though, in the sense of like making sure it doesn't turn into like you're coming so somber into the session that the client is then like taking care of you. Like,
Absolutely. Oh, that's a brilliant question. Maybe we come back to that one in just a second, but yes, I think I think the path toward genuine self-expression as a therapist still has to pass through the most foundational question: am I supporting the client, and am I operating within the client's worldview?
yeah.
So am I living in their world, and am I helping them toward their goals, their needs, and their values? So I might have a mood state that is affecting the way that I do that, but I have to do that. I have to join them in their world, and I have to align myself with their goals. Otherwise, I question whether we're doing therapy.
Yeah, 100%. In this larger question of like this relationship that we're building with this client, I just want to ask you, like, what do you feel is like your definition of the therapeutic relationship?
Yeah, it might be tough, even though this was in our show notes, it might be tough to drop a complete definition. I'll say I can speak to some of the elements of it.
Totally.
Firstly, from my perspective, I think it is a relationship like any other relationship insofar as it matters.
Yeah.
This person matters to me, and I matter to them. I think that there's some camps that care less about the therapeutic relationship. In fact, a question that you'll often see on the EPPP, which is the exam that psychologists, well, aspiring psychologists have to take, is essentially which of these is not a foundational element of cognitive behavioral therapy, and the correct answer is usually the therapeutic relationship. When I use CBT, and I'm not a strict CBTer, but when I use CBT, frankly, I beg to differ.
Yeah.
I try very hard to make sure that the therapeutic relationship is a part of the work that we're doing with respect to the thoughts and emotions that the person is experiencing and examining. So I do think that there's this element of we have to matter to one another, and this temporary state that psychology found it. I think it's temporary state that psychology found itself in to care less about the bond denies what we call common factors research. I'll make a note to make sure we talk about that too.
Mhm.
But it also is just inhumane in a way.
Mhm.
This person is bringing us vulnerability, even if it's just, I have this particular emotion. To share an emotion with another person and to say, I'm struggling with it, is vulnerability. And to meet that robotically or mechanistically or solely through the use of technique and tool, I feel like is to deny the humanity of that vulnerability.
Right. Otherwise, why isn't the person just like going on ChatGPT and like asking questions of what they should do with their life,
Yeah.
and
Have you
getting.
ever have you ever tried asking ChatGPT for like life advice?
No, I actually have not. Have you?
I wanted to play around with. Well, they keep telling me that it's going to threaten my job and my livelihood. So I wanted to see who my competitor was.
Yeah, and what did you find?
I I'm not scared. Um, and I'll tell you why I'm not scared. Even with its improvements, there's two things that give me some solace. One, I think that the predominance of writing, maybe three things. The predominance of writing on psychotherapy, especially lately, has been more mechanistic and robotic. Um, and because of that, that's the kind of answer you get back from AI. It's not going to take risks.
Yeah,
It's not going to suggest really deep responses in the way that Delve thinks about deep therapy work
yeah,
typically. Um, and it equivocates a lot, especially because the companies don't want to be seen as giving you life advice truly.
right.
They don't want to be found culpable for those bits of guidance. And then my last is people want to connect with people.
Mhm.
It's the thing that has been a central source of calm for me with respect to AI is that we're probably not going to enjoy going to an AI comedy show, no matter how funny the jokes are, because we want to connect with people, and we
Yeah,
keep building these technologies. And yes, I do know that some of them drive us farther apart, but mostly what we do with them is we try to connect with people.
100%. There's just like that nuance and humanness that like at least so far AI can't replicate. And I think that's why like therapy is going to be one of the few professions that I feel like is going to be not as affected by AI. Hopefully.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm not worried about it because
Yeah.
I think the practitioners that do rely a lot on technique uh, and logistics and struggle with the human relationship, I do think that it may get harder to
Mhm.
retain clients. Though I suspect that that's already the case. I suspect that that's a challenge for those clinicians anyway. I I just think about the fact that our ancestry. One of my weird interests is uh, like ancient hominids and the old sort of Australopiths that were running around the grasslands and the early I guess the old forest, but whatever. And I think about the obvious community that they were structured around that we retain as humans, as Homo sapiens today. They were building community, they were building families, they were working together throughout various species. And I see us continuing that trend probably forever into whatever future we have.
Yeah. Yeah, we're always going to want to like build that relationship, and I think a lot of in my master's program there's a lot of talk about like, okay, like what is the dynamic of this relationship, because some people would say it's more depending on the approach. It's like either it's like the therapist is the expert and then the client is the student. I would say that's more from a CBT lens.
Mm.
And then there's sort of the, you know, we're on the same level playing field here. That would probably be more of a Carl Rogers approach. So I guess between the two of like the therapist is sort of the expert and then the client is sort of the student or the patient, and or the sort of approach where they're kind of on the same level.
Mm.
Where do you feel like you fall in your approach?
Oh, the cliche is that we're a guide, but I've been working on a metaphor lately that I'm really loving. I don't think I've shared with you actually. So I'm stretching my own truth here a little bit to make the parable or the metaphor work. So bear with me on that. But I grew up in West Virginia, and near my house, like right at the end of the yard, was this forest. I spent a lot of time in these woods. I'd go in the woods and I'd spend a lot of time in there. And as a result, I kind of knew where things were in there. If there was like a little pond, I knew where it was. If there was a little trail, I knew where it was. And if you dropped me in those woods just about anywhere, I could figure out roughly where I was.
Yeah.
And approximately how to get back. So do I know exactly where I am? Probably not. There's just trees around me. But do I have a general sense? I could probably figure it out pretty quickly. It's a way of saying, I know those woods. I still know those woods. I still think about those woods from time to time. Like if I was to go back there, I'm sure things have changed and that tree fell down or whatever. But I know those woods.
Yeah.
So when a client comes along, I think of the woods in this metaphor as essentially being the major psychological struggles that a human might encounter. In some form or fashion, I've now been doing this for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously just like starting off in early training, but then, you know, more and more professionally and across many more hours. There aren't a whole lot of circumstances I haven't seen at this point. People have brought me all manner of thing in all manner of way, and I've had to think about it. I've had to think about how to make sense of it. And I've seen how people have made sense of it and how they've found their way to the other side. I know these woods. Do I know them perfectly? No. Can I be surprised? Absolutely. Will I sometimes come across a patch that I've never been in before? 100%. But I roughly know where that is relative to everything else. I know approximately where I'm at any given moment. And I generally speaking know how to get out if I need to.
Mm-hmm.
I will be unsuccessful. I will turn my ankle. I will get turned around. I will end up making mistakes and moving the wrong direction. All of those things are still true. But if a client walks in these woods with me, I can walk with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say, I think we should take a left up here. And the client might say, to hell with that. I'm taking a right. All right, I'll follow you. I still think we should go left, but if you're going right, I'm going with you. And if you go right for a good old long time, and then you're like, I don't think this is the right direction to go. I'm not just going to be like, well, now let's go left. I'm going to, relative to where we're at, be like, I think we need to head back in this direction. That'll generally get us in toward the thing that we're trying to accomplish. It very much is that metaphor of a guide in familiar woods. I don't know everything. I will screw up. So will you. But we can get through it together. And this is one piece of the metaphor I really like. If we're walking, client and me, we're walking together, they'll see things that I don't, even in the woods that I know really well. So we're walking along the path and they'll say, hey, watch out for that snake. Or, oh my gosh, look out for that pothole. I'm like, I didn't even see that there. I know these woods so well, but I didn't even see that there. That's the humility to say that no matter how well I know these woods, you got eyes too. And you can see things that I've never considered, never paid attention to. It's my favorite thing about bringing a new person to an old city that you know really well, is they'll point things out that you've walked past 1 billion times. You'd be like, I've never looked at that. So fascinating.
What a beautiful metaphor. I feel like that sort of falls, would you say, in the middle of the two options that I kind of presented?
I think so. There is a degree of power in the therapeutic, in the therapist's role within the therapeutic alliance. But I think we need to wield it carefully and, frankly, not very often. Most of the time, I think we're just humans and we're just together. And the way that I try to wield power is typically more that, like, I'm going to show you what I know, or at least what I think I know. And after that, I'm going to cede ground. You know, where do you want to go? What do you want to talk about? What are you trying to accomplish? Where do you want to pop out of these woods at? Let's see if we can head toward it.
Yeah. Because some would take the stance that, like, the client is the expert in their own lives, essentially. And I think yes, but also I think that we as therapists, like, come to the session with our own, like, breadth of knowledge, like while you're saying, in, like, the many years that you've been doing this, and that can be helpful for the client. So it's I would agree. I would take sort of this, like, middle approach of, like, I'm not gonna just in these sessions just sit there and tell you exactly what to do or what you should be doing.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, in your sessions with clients, that idea of they're the expert on their own reality. What do you think about that? Like, do you believe that?
Well, I think that everyone has, like, a version of their own reality. As a therapist, I like to take what my clients come in and tell me about what's going on with them at face value, and trust in what they're saying. But I also feel like there may be blind spots to their own reality that we can help them see. So as far as, like, the client knowing what's best for them in their lives, I feel like if that were 100% true, then why are they in therapy?
What do they want from us?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where it's complicated, because on the surface, to deny the client the truth that they're bringing us feels risky. It feels it starts to feel almost paternalistic from the therapist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think we kid ourselves if we say we're not doing that on some level by suggesting, hey, I think I'm seeing you having a particular bias here.
Yes.
That's not the way to think of that based on, my years of experience or my theoretical orientation. There is an element of that does deny at least some parts of the client's reality. And even a client who comes in and says, I'm just a fucking failure, even if that's what they say, to say, no, you're not, or I don't think that's the right way to think about that, is a kind of denial of their reality.
Right. 100%. And to give them that autonomy to have their perspective, to have their own, like, what they believe is the truth of what's going on. And
right. And I feel like maybe our charge, where I'd fall on this, is our charge is to get all of the perspectives on the table. I think of us as being in the perspectives business. So the client coming in with their reality, I want to honor that as an extremely important perspective on what is going on.
Right.
And then I want to ask myself, can I spot any other perspectives on what may be happening here? Can I gather any more data regarding what might be happening here? And can we explore together what how to think about the various possibilities here, and then give it back to the client and say, all right, your life, your rules, you're in charge. What do you want to do?
Right. I think that's the piece where I agree with like the client being like the expert in their own life, so to speak, is like at the end of all this exploration of the other possible perspectives and identifying biases and opening their eyes to things that they may not see and challenging. Then at the end, it's like at the end of the day,
They have to retain agency.
exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to a couple of the other things we
Yeah.
touched on really quickly. So, how do we think about them taking care of us?
Yeah.
I had a because I'm the clinical director here, so I end up supporting the clinicians in doing their work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was brought an interesting circumstance recently in which a clinician was going through something big personally, in one of those ways that the client's going to notice. They're going to notice that they're canceling more often than typical. They're going to notice that they're not in their, typical home or location, because we do this virtually very often, predominantly at Delve. And it's sort of one of those where the client's going to notice. And it was clearly also a difficult time for the clinician, so it's possible that the client may even notice that. So the question was, like, do I tell these people or not? Do I tell them that there's something going on with me, or do I just sort of leave it in this vague world of stuff's happening, but we're not talking about it? I'm curious if you have early thoughts on how to handle that before I give away what I suggested.
My hunch is that you encouraged her to share. That's what I think.
You're checking for my approval.
Is that correct? No, just because at this point, with all of the elements that you described, like they're not in their regular house, they're having to reschedule or cancel, it's kind of obvious at this point. So to not speak to the elephant in the room, I feel like would be disingenuous and would cause more like just the trust in the therapeutic relationship would be kind of off, because you're not actually speaking to what's happening, I think, at that point.
Right. Yeah. It's I think, again, kind of a denial of the humanity. I think these people do care about us.
Yeah.
And what's weird about this therapeutic relationship is that they don't get to. Some will try. Some clients will really try very hard to start taking care of us, and that's when people start bringing food, or like, where do I send gifts? That's where some of those dynamics can get really tricky and challenging. But yes, that's essentially what I encouraged was share a little bit and let them care a little bit. It's human for them to care about you. It's human for them to worry about you a little bit. Watch for that becoming more than a little bit. And what I found was so wonderful about this experience was that clients were great. Of course they were. They cared to the right degree for a few minutes at the top of the session when things were shared, and then transition back to, okay, it's my session.
Yeah.
You're here for me.
Right.
We're gonna do the thing now. And I've had that experience in smaller ways when I've had to, self-disclose some aspect of my own world to clients. They generally handle it really well for the most part. I think you still have to think about the exact therapeutic relationship. You have to think about the implications for the client and where they're at relative to their own goals and personalities and boundaries, etc. We got to think through it. But for the most part, I think people get it, and they kind of know what to do, and they understand boundaries pretty well for the most part. And I truly believe that most people are just trying to look out for one another as best they can.
I love that. I think that's a great answer to my sort of question of how do we make sure they're not taking care of us, but also making sure we're being human in our interactions with them and not just like putting up pretenses and being fake. And again, they could go to ChatGPT if they wanted to.
They could, but they don't want to.
They don't want to.
Yeah, it's not like we're seeing fewer clients.
No, absolutely
not. The other one that I wanted to make sure to talk about was this idea of common factors. So just to define that term a bit, there was a whole branch of research that looked at what makes therapy work. You would think that it is the therapeutic technique, which comes from the theoretical orientation, and those things do matter, they do help, but it largely matters and helps as a way of framing the work that we're doing, the way to think about the work that we're doing. What matters so much more, very clearly in the research, over and over and over again, are these ideas of common factors: having a trusting relationship with another person, having a safe space, and then, of course, a way of thinking, not a specific way of thinking, but some way of thinking about what's going on.
Yeah.
And so when we go back to it just reminds me again of, at one point, we were little Australopiths, and we were learning from older Australopiths, trying to understand how to Australopith. We learn from one another. This is Bandura's social learning theory. We are watching, we're paying attention, we're learning from one another. Therapy is just a professionalization of this trend that we've had back millions of years. You know, we learn from one another. We try to learn from people who've done a thing or know a thing or tried stuff before, or maybe have a little bit more experience or wisdom or age, whatever it is. We're just doing what we're doing, what we've always done. Yeah.
Well, that's like crazy to think about, just how far back this sort of idea of just like human connection goes. And like, I mean, I know research has shown, and certainly Carl Rogers would say, that like a great deal of the success of therapy is just the therapeutic relationship itself.
Yeah. I think it's the first starting point. Begin by being a human. I wonder if you remember, because I started working with you before you had ever done any therapy at all, before, like from day zero. You had never seen a client. Do you remember the advice I gave you before going into your first session?
Just be a human? Something along those lines?
Thereabouts, yeah. Start with humanity. Usually what I recommend to people is, I say, have you ever supported a friend, a family member, someone that you love through a difficult time? You know the rules, follow those, but otherwise, start with that.
Yeah.
Start by just trying to show up with care and support in mind. And then let me watch it, and I'll help with the technique. But what I find in teaching, because at Delve, we start with interns. We pick interns who have never done it at all before, and we really, as often as we can, we do, and we really try to build that foundation of skill from the ground up all the way. What I've found is that not only is that a pretty good starting point and helps the student feel a bit more at ease in going into the first session, but also the natural inclinations of the student will start to come out, and they'll start doing the things the way that they tend to do things in their life, which is the beginnings of a genuine expression of self as a therapist in the Therapeutic Alliance. So it's sort of my shortcut to say, start by being you. And follow the rules, but start by being you. And then we can shape that slowly toward the kinds of approaches, going back to the integrative approach that Delve uses.
Yeah.
Because we've got a variety of different ways of working, I can notice how you're thinking and what you're trying to do. I can name it, and then I can teach you at least the basics of that. And if you want to take off with it from there, I'll get you some resources, get you started, and off you go to building your own way. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you knew that was the model.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, and I think that that's just great advice too, because I feel like it takes the pressure off a little bit. It's scary going into your first um therapy session with a client, and to just like take it down to just the base of like, have you ever sat with someone who's going through something and you were just there and provided empathy and support? Yes. Okay. Well, you can do this. I mean, yes, there's more nuance in the actual techniques and all of those things that we can refine, but just the idea of like, you've done this a million times before, actually. Um, just put some of the pressure off of like, oh, okay, I'm just a human sitting with another human.
Right.
That's the bare bones of it. That's it, really.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think this whole conversation is a really good segue into one of our recent Substack posts that you wrote, Adam. This idea of advice giving in therapy. I think a lot of clients literally come to therapy just to be like, okay, tell me what to do. You know everything. You know exactly what to do in every single situation. You're the expert. Tell me what to do. Thoughts?
My joke anytime a client tells me, tell me what to do is, I don't know, buy a cat.
That's great advice, I think, in any situation.
Well, I did have a client one time say, I'm allergic to cats. I was like, that's why you shouldn't follow my advice.
Great example of, yeah, exactly.
What I think I try to do, and what I think I would encourage other therapists to do is, well, maybe first I should say what I perceive a lot of therapists, especially students, attempt is pure neutrality.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that sounds tough. What do you think you'll do? Which on some level the client's already thought about, of course.
Right.
Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes a client really does just need to talk through it, just say it out loud. Let me work through my thought process here. In real time, that kind of out loud social, processing. But usually, if they're bringing it to us, usually it's more complicated than that. Usually they're struggling with it in a deeper way, and they don't have an immediate answer. So when you say, what do you think you'll do? They say, I don't know. And now what are we doing?
Yeah.
What I've tried to encourage is that there is a way of operating in the space of what ideas are on the table, not just brainstorming, but starting with brainstorming. Like, what are the available options? And can we start to think through those a bit? Can we start to think through what the possibilities are and how to move forward? And in that way, I think the therapist can end up often providing a really valuable dialogue to the person. So you've seen me do this before, but a client says, I'm not sure if I want to do A or B. So if I sense that they are leaning more toward side A, I take side A.
Yeah.
That then forces them, in a way, in a dialogue kind of forcing, to really flesh out idea B. They're stuck a little bit in A, so
Right.
let me take them out of that headspace and put them in the other headspace. And what I find so fascinating about this is you could talk with a client for a half hour about option A and option B, and it sounds like they've fleshed out absolutely everything.
Right.
Then when you do this little bit to say, all right, I'm taking a side just for exploration's sake. I don't have any stakes in the game. You pick A, you pick B. I don't care. I'm still here, walking with you in the woods.
Yeah.
But if I take side A and they start fleshing out side B, they almost always will start generating new content that you have not yet heard. You've seen this happen where all of a sudden we've talked for a while. I take a side and they just start, they're like, well, what are we going to do with the truck? I was like, I didn't even know the truck was a part of this.
Right.
But by picking a side, you give them something to work against. And I try to kind of let clients know that I'm doing this. Right. I'm not holding a position right now. I don't really have a stake in the game for what choice you make here. I'm just going to pick a side for exploration's sake.
Right.
I find it immensely valuable.
Yeah. First time I saw you do this, I loved this. Just this idea of like, okay, this is not therapist Adam right now. I'm playing something here. Just go with me. I'm going to fully take side A, and I'm going to say, okay, yeah, choose A. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, wait a minute.
But here's all the argument about the other side.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But I think it's so helpful because a lot of times they're just like waffling between A and B. But if like we're in this imaginary scenario, making them pick, A or B, then it's like all of a sudden it I don't know, like it feels more like there's more stakes, and so more comes out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's almost like this sense of, well, before I let this go, let me really do it justice.
Yeah,
so to speak.
Exactly.
So the other somewhat antagonistic thing that I can do in therapy is if a client comes to me clearly making a case for one thing and not exploring the other side at all, let's hypothetically say, I think I'm going to divorce my partner. I need to. Here's all my reasons for it. And they're almost asking my permission to do it. I'll say, all right, do it. Now, again, I've established with my clients that I'm not actually telling them what to do. But all right, do it. Almost immediately saying, all right, do it. They'll tell me why they don't want to divorce their partner. It's so paradoxical.
Exactly. It's like yeah.
But then you can explore that emotionality. I mean, the simple intervention from there is really just, it sounds like this is a really tough decision. And I hear a lot of things that you're worried about losing in this or something like that.
Yeah. I love this approach. I really resonate with this idea of like, because coming out of my master's program, I felt like, yeah, I like don't give advice, don't tell them what to do. That's a recipe for disaster. Because it's, well, two things. It's like either you give them advice and it's good advice and it works out. So then if it's good advice and it works out, then they're always dependent on you and going to come to you for every single question and advice that they need. And they come dependent on you, which we don't want. We want them to be able to be independent, humans and not really need us at the end of the day. Okay. Then on the opposite side, if we give them advice and it turns out horribly wrong, then we're the ones to blame. Those are sort of the dangers that I was kind of told about, like not giving, direct advice of what to do. On the opposite end though, if you literally if a client comes to you and says, I don't know like what to do, I'm really struggling with this decision, and all you come back to them with is, yeah, that sounds like a really tough dilemma you're in. I don't know, like, what do you think? I can imagine a client being like, well, what the heck? I just asked you. Like, I just said, I don't know.
Paying for this?
Like I just said, I don't know. And I could imagine them getting frustrated. And so in this sort of exploration that you're doing with them, weighing the options, I know you mentioned like gathering more data on, both sides, making sure you have all the information you need, making sure you've like experienced each side enough and processed each side enough. And then at the end, it's okay, like it's up to you, but at least like you're helping them through the decision-making process and not just being like, I don't know, my hands are tied. Like, don't look at me. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think we can kind of get into the three things to focus on when you don't know what to do. But I also wanted to speak to this idea of, all right, sometimes we do give a little bit of advice. Sometimes we do. An example might be a father who's feeling very disconnected from life. He takes care of the kids and goes to work and just kind of does that every day. And is sort of saying, like, is this all there is? I'm probably going to tell him to make friends, right? Like,
Yeah.
but where's that advice coming from? Firstly, again, if he says, nope, I'm doing this on my own and I'm not, all right, wherever you want to walk in the woods is your prerogative. Like, you, at the end of the day, are free to make your choices however you mean to. But I do understand these woods, and I understand the value of social companionship outside of your marriage and family, and parental relationships as a major source of healing and connection for any human life. So I'm derelict in my duty if I don't say that.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. There's some circumstances where it's like, okay, like me giving you the advice to build out your social supports, I feel like is pretty standard advice, and is not going to blow up in the ways that, like, I was warned in my master's program. And it's just like, yeah, like, this would help you. Like, I'm sorry, it would. Like, you know.
Yeah, and I remember talking with an old therapist of mine many years ago when I was in a tricky spot in like an academic thing, and I was like spinning in circles and ruminating, trying really hard to co-ruminate with this therapist. Probably the most effective thing he did, the one thing that I remember him saying, I don't remember all the other crap he talked about in all those other sessions, but the one thing that I remember him saying was, "Hey, Adam, get help." That's advice, right?
Yeah, it is advice.
But I listened to it because I was clearly bringing to him, I'm struggling with this. I'm hesitant to take it to the people who could really support me in it. And there was a little permission giving in that. But here I am describing that as the most effective thing that he did, and the maybe only thing I remember. So,
Wow, that was really impactful for you.
yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely like, it's a line that we walk for sure, but I do tend to be a little more on the directive side in my approach, I think, and I think you are too.
Yeah. But directive toward what? At the end of the day, it's directive toward the goals, the needs, and the values that the client has established. I align with those, you know?
Their goals, needs, and values, not mine, not my own, but the client's.
Right.
Yes.
So, the 3 things that you can gather, that you can get when you're trying to decide what to do. There's 3 things that might be lacking. One is data itself. If there's some information, like, if I quit my job, will I get COBRA benefits? Maybe you have an answer to that, maybe you don't. But if you don't have an answer to that, and it's proximal to the decision that you're going to make, if that data is gettable, go get it. If it's not gettable, you don't need it to make the decision. Right. Otherwise, we're living in a magical land of whatever, where we have information that we don't get to have. So I think coming to the acceptance of this thing that I wish I could know, I can't know, so make a choice. The second is more analysis. Maybe I need to think through this problem more, find another person, see if they could turn it over in a different way. Or maybe I do something like a pros cons list or a catastrophe map or something like, but somehow I need to take what data I have and crunch it differently or better, or from a different perspective. That's I think what a lot of therapists will end up trying to move toward is why don't we make a pros cons list? Is essentially, what if we analyze this deeper, better, etc. Then the last one's hard to describe, but I would say it's more experience. Maybe whatever this feels like, I need to sit in, and I need to see what that does to me
Yeah.
So an example of that might be I start taking a poetry class, and I'm uncomfortable every day, and I hate all the poetry that I write. I could reactively quit, or I could just sit in the way that feels bad for a little while and see if it changes. Maybe I get more
Mhm.
comfortable with it. Maybe I don't, but then that helps me to clarify that this is just a really uncomfortable experience for me. Um, or maybe I learn that it is really uncomfortable, but in a way that actually I'm willing to accept. So living in it gives me the power to make it, or it gives me the knowledge that I may need about my own experience of the thing, that then I could potentially make a choice from.
Mm. What do you think of sort of like a mindfulness exercise of like imagining that you have made the decision and like sitting in how you feel in that space of like, I've made this choice. How does that feel? Okay, I've made that choice. How does that feel? What do you think
Mm.
about that sort of exercise?
I suppose I'm not against it in some way, as long as I think we're careful about the fact that that would be present day Allie supposing what future Allie is going to think, feel, and believe.
True.
And
Hmm.
I think those machinations are always wrong.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
one day when I get the thing, I will feel all better. It's like,
But
you don't know how you're going to feel. You have no idea.
yeah. Yeah. You can't anticipate how it is going to feel.
But our only access to the future is in the present moment.
Hmm.
And so I do think it's a valuable exercise respective to right here, right now, what do I think and believe about the future? That is
Mm.
valuable.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Yeah, I think it's a really great post on our Substack that you guys should check out. The title is "Tell Me What to Do!" Three exclamation points. um, Definitely check that out, and our other Substack posts. Some really juicy topics in there that are really good for your brain to mull over.
And
Um,
more to come, and I'm hoping
and
to get Allie to write one. Huh?
yes, I yes, I will be working on one very soon.
Nice.
Um, Lastly, you have another quote up there behind your head, Adam, on your whiteboard. Do not love transactionally.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Uh, um, I think it's so easy to get into this headspace of, well, I'm only going to do this if they're going to do that, or I'll only, look after their interests if they're looking after mine, or they stopped looking after mine, or they seem confused about what mine are. Therefore, I'm going to reactively, protest or something like that. Um, I see this constantly in romantic relationships. It's like, you're not doing what I need, so I stop doing what you need. It's like,
Mm,
how the hell is that the answer?
yeah, it it feels like you're gonna have to be like keeping tabs and keeping score and adjusting based on like the lack that you're feeling from the other person, and it just feels very vindictive, and I don't like it.
I agree. So don't do it. But also, I think that we've gotten tricked by media and in the modern, zeitgeist, if you will, into believing that love is this thing that you feel, or love is this experience that you have, rather than a responsibility, a verb, and a thing that you have to make choices about. You like loving is an act that your thoughts and emotions and behaviors throw into another person. Loving is a thing that you do for others because you mean to. So if you're unhappy with a particular circumstance or person, you have a choice on your hands. You could wield your agency in such a way that you just start blaming them for everything and then protesting and then slowly drifting apart. I question why you make those choices, but you could do that.
Right.
Alternatively, you could make a very clear choice for yourself to ask for what you need, to decide to give up and communicate that and walk away, or to just remain loyal, but noticing that that's your choice. So at the moment that you decide, I'm going to accept that this person isn't able to do this thing for me, not their fault. You chose it.
Right.
It's your responsibility at the end of the day. So I think that while we want to love willingly as a verb, it also reminds us that we're in charge of our own destiny here.
Mm.
And if in any given moment you're unhappy with what is happening around you, you still have the same tool available to you. Your choices, your actions. You can accept, you can speak up, you can leave. It's pretty much the choices.
Yeah. Well, I love that quote, and I 100% agree. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this episode of the Delve podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed our foray into different topics related to therapy. I feel like it was a really juicy discussion. We at Delve Psychotherapy of Chicago, again, we are offering individual, couples, group, family therapy, immediate options for extremely low cost therapy, accessible. Please visit our website to reach out and book with us, delvepsych.com, DELVEPSYCH.com. And then, of course, for the post that we were talking about today in the podcast, as well as many other really great ones, do check out our Substack at delvepsych.substack.com. And we will see you next time.
Thank you so much.